Welcome everyone. I would like to start by introducing ourselves. So the Society of Heart's Delight, 愚园社 in Chinese, started up earlier this year. We are a community of Chinese immigrants who moved to America as adults. Our focus is on helping Chinese professionals to engage with local life and culture, contribute to the public good, and feel a sense of belonging while having fun. My name is Michelle. I'm the founder of 愚园社, and I will be one of your hosts today.
And my name is Pat. I'm a co-founder of the Society of Heart's Delight, and I'll also be one of your hosts today. Although I am not Chinese, I enjoyed living in China for close to 7 years, and I helped other Americans to adjust to life in Chengdu. Everyone is different, of course, but I know firsthand how challenging and rewarding it can be to move to another country as an adult. I'm fortunate that I had many meaningful experiences and developed friendships that will last a lifetime while living in China. In fact, I still consider Chengdu to be my second home.
After making the US my home, I wanted to understand more about the different roles in local government, what politicians do and how they make decisions. Keep in mind that we are not a political organization, and each individual has the right to vote for their candidate of choice. We believe that learning about local politics, having sincere conversations, and listening with an open heart is a good thing for everyone in our society.
This is challenging, especially when we live in such divided times. We decided to launch election countdown conversations to focus on what our political leaders actually do, how we can each get involved, and why it matters. So please keep questions and comments respectful and related to the topic and to our guest speakers today. Okay, for our first conversation, we are so honored to have two very special guests with us today. Current Santa Clara County Supervisor for District 4, Susan Ellenberg, and candidate for Santa Clara County Supervisor for District 3, Otto Lee.
We'll have 4 parts to our conversation. First, Susan and Otto will share a little bit about their stories and what motivated them to enter into politics. Second, we will ask about the function of the 5 Santa Clara County Supervisors. Third, we will discuss how to become more informed and why participating in the political process is important. In the end, our guest will answer questions from the audience. So, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, let's start.
All right, so we're starting with the fun part, which is about personal stories and about how Susan and Otto began their political careers. So I met you, Susan, out on the campaign trail before your decisive win in 2018, which feels like a very, very long time ago. Back then, I was able to ask you questions in person, and I also got a glimpse of how much work it is to run for office. Can you share with our viewers a bit about your personal story and how you got into politics? I'm also curious about why you decided to run for Santa Clara County Supervisor in particular, and how you've drawn on your previous experience in the work you do now.
Thank you. Thank you first, Pat and Michelle, for creating this tremendous forum. I'm really excited to see not only this episode, but how it grows and how you engage civically more and more of the immigrant community. I think that this is a tremendous service and hopefully wonderful opportunity to build new relationships as well. So I came to public service fairly late. My first career was as a real estate and land use attorney, briefest career as well. And then I was home for a number of years with my children, and I pivoted to education, and I taught social justice and civic engagement. And I taught both middle schoolers and adults. So this is an area that is just very familiar to me, important to me, and very comfortable. And it was in fact out of that education piece where I was teaching my students about political advocacy and social activism and how we create change And there was an issue that was going on at my youngest daughter's high school. The parents and foundation members were upset about it. They wanted somebody new to run for school board and turned to me. And at the same time, it was both a total surprise and oh, of course, as if I had been planning to do that. So I ran for school board in 2014, won that seat. And again, education has always been something that's so critical to me. And in another climate, economic and political climate, I may have been very happy to stay on the school board. But what I was seeing was that so many kids were facing barriers to success that were not academic, that were based on socioeconomic status and access to early childhood education and stable, non-overcrowded housing and access to regular sufficient nutrition and healthcare and on and on. And none of these were issues that could be directly addressed at the school district level. These are all specifically county services. County government is what we call the safety net. I don't know if that's an idiom that works, but it's the sort of catch-all for people that have a range of different vulnerabilities or instabilities. The county's job is to try to work to make sure every single person in our community, including the most vulnerable among us, has access to what I think of are those 6 basic things: a safe and stable place to sleep every night, regular access to nutritious food, access to affordable health care, to a high quality education, and to the opportunity to work and make a living that allows you to take care of your family. So when I saw that there was an opening on the Board of Supervisors, I thought that is exactly where I want to be, to have essentially a broader and more impactful opportunity to really work to stabilize particularly children and families and help them thrive. And it's been a year and a half, a little more than a year and a half in this job. And though I certainly wasn't expecting a pandemic, economic meltdown, this degree of racial unrest, and now fires, I'm so grateful every day to be in this job, to have an opportunity to be productive and useful during this time, to help people that are struggling in a variety of ways. I'm really honored and just grateful to be in this job.
That's wonderful. And you know, I think you guys know this is like our first time trying to do something like this ever. So we're not journalists, we're not professionals by any means. So thank you for being patient as we learn how to do this. I didn't want to limit the time on sort of that introduction. Just a really quick side note. I remember some people were thinking you should have gone from the school board to city council member because they thought you were like skipping a step. But you felt like, no, those are the issues I really care about on the county level. So I think that's really interesting for our viewers to know, is sort of what the county does, because a lot of people—
The county, the way I distinguish it, Pat, that seems to be most helpful for people is that cities are largely about infrastructure, zoning, permits, building, maintenance, utilities, also generally police and fire. Counties, for the most part, are about services for people who are struggling. And for me, that's where my passions are. And people come into government at all different levels. Some people, you know, run for supervisor or Congress or something else for their, you know, at their first point. I'm not as interested in the, you know, the stepstones as a career as in diving in where you have passion, talents to offer, and real energy to put in the work. And I'm in the right place.
Super inspiring. So
yeah, we are lucky to have you on the board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, my question is for Otto. We both are immigrants and attorneys, and you held a range of positions in your career. And I noticed that you talk about being a father with 3 daughters. Can you share a little bit about your personal story? How you got into politics in the first place, and why you are running for supervisor?
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Pat, and truly great to be sharing today on the panel with our good friend Susan Ellenberg. Susan and I, we've known each other for at least a decade, and I've known her husband even longer, and truly dear friend of mine as well. And I would say that I echo what Susan said, what the county's role is something that actually is quite not so understood by a lot of people. People understand, you know, the president of the United States does certain things, right? And then the mayor of a city or your city council does certain things. And maybe then you have your state assembly, your state senators down in Sacramento, and the governor. County is the level that I think a lot of people really don't understand what county does. And I remember when I was knocking on doors talking to folks, people would say, supervisor, what exactly do you supervise? Right? Susan heard that before. I mean, like a park supervisor or something like that. And it's, I mean, the title's one thing, but there's a level, which to explain it better would be, you know, you could say there's a city level, the county level, the state, and then the federal government. Those are really very distinct level. And especially just to a little bit about my history, and I will talk about the differences. So I was originally born in Hong Kong, came here when I was 15 years old in '82. For schools and also basically having the concern, you know, with China taking over Hong Kong, how to change the way of life, which we are seeing some of it right now, of the national security law, which of course I'm concerned about what's going to happen to Hong Kong's, you know, freedom of speech and assembly. But that's part of the reason why my family came here initially. I went to high school, went to college at UC Berkeley, and I actually participated in this Navy ROTC in college. And so I joined the US Navy actually after graduation in engineering. Served a couple of years active duty and then went to law school in Hastings in San Francisco and became a IP, patent, trademark, copyright lawyer, combining an engineering background to do that. So that's basically my professional career. When after I left Intel, I was there for a little while. I actually was in the middle of deciding what to do with my life. Should I open my own law firm? And I got the flyer that says, hey, why don't you volunteer for your city? And I looked at it that says, well, you could, you know, apply to be on the commission. I started with, okay, arts commission, no, you don't want me with arts, trust me. And then there's bikes and pedestrians, like, yeah, it's interesting, but then I'll go all the way down to P, it's like planning commission. It's like, planning commission, well, some land use, you know, I studied property law in law school. I said, maybe I could be doing that. So I applied and I got on the planning commission in Sunny Bun. That's basically how I kind of started to know more about the local government. And then eventually, having served for a few years, people say, hey, you'll be great, you should run for city council. And that's basically how I started my my political career in that sense, in the city council. At the same time, I was still practicing law, because not every city has the same system whereby the city council is really a part-time position in most of the small cities. In San Jose, it's a full-time position. But in
actually, that was one of our questions. So in some cities you can work and be on city council or other.
Yeah, it's a part-time position. And even in planning commission too, it's really a volunteer position. I still remember there was one time a Chinese delegation that came and visited us, and he saw my business card as the chair of the planning commission. He was so impressed. He said, wow, you must be
I understand why.
Right, in China especially. I said, you know, I have to apologize to disappoint you. The planning commission is a volunteer position. We have no money on the table, and we have no money under the table. Right, yeah. And you know, it really is a different system when you compare it to other places. For those who grew up in China, you know, I was in the city council as the mayor and the council for 8 years, and there were times that I completely disagree with the governor, then Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, or then President George W. Bush, and I would actually be sitting there and criticizing and condemning the acts that's done by the president or the governor in very negative tone. I wasn't very diplomatic about it. And I remember this one time there was another Chinese delegation visiting. They sit there and they were in shock, like, this could never happen in China. I thought, well, we're a different system, right? Every level of government that we talk about, city, county, state, and federal, we are all separate level. We are elected by our people directly, and we don't really controlled by the other level. And that's what makes our system very different. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm glad that we could get a sense and a feeling for, how you each entered into politics. That's amazing. For the next step of questions, just because gosh, I could talk with you both for like 3 hours, but we have to keep it maybe just as you're probably used to people telling you like, a couple minute answers, even though we're going to throw some big questions at you. So, okay, but before that, we have a couple fun rapid fire questions, just a one-word answer. And the first question for each of you is?
Noodles or rice?
Rice.
Noodles.
Okay. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how spicy do you like your food?
2.
Oh, at least 6.
At least 6. Okay. you might score some votes that way, Otto. So
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay, Susan. You're already safe for this round. So
Yeah.
Okay, so this question is for Susan. And now we're going to get on to the next part to talk about the role of county supervisor, along with some of the big issues before supervisors. And this is for Susan. I've heard you talk about how many people don't really exactly know what supervisors do. We talked about that a little bit. In District 4, you represent a diverse population of more than 400,000 people, and you are one of only 5 supervisors in charge of a huge budget of more than $8 billion. Is that right? Did I get that number right?
Yes.
This year, unfortunately, it's less, but
Okay.
that's the general realm.
Okay. You also serve on the chair of the county's Public Safety and Justice Committee, if I got that right, and the vice chair of the Health and Hospitals Committee. So that sounds like a lot. In plain terms, can you help us to understand the work of county supervisors and how
Sure.
does it connect to the lives of your constituents? Maybe just a couple examples. I know you can't answer the whole thing.
Okay, that is a huge question. But so let me start. I would say that my job can be broken down really into 3 buckets. And the first one is oversight. I and the other 4 elected county supervisors, just a quick map, Santa Clara County is about 1.9 million residents. We are divided into 5 districts. So as Pat and Michelle said, I represent District 4, and I, along with my 4 colleagues, oversee the county executive. This is a person that is hired to manage and run all of the county operations, which, by the way, is about 22,000 employees across more than 40 departments. So we oversee the county executive and just 5 other people that are appointed by the board. We do not direct any of the operational staff. We set policy, we oversee and approve the budget, which this year was extraordinarily painful, and we direct the county executive to fulfill our policy vision, but through his operationalization. And our recourse, if we are not happy with how things are going at the county, is to let the county executive know, and in the worst case, terminate him and start again. So that oversight function is critical. It's critical to me that it's transparent, that people know what we are asking of the county executive, and that they know how he is responding to us, how he is allocating the money. He presents a proposed budget to us, and we ask lots of questions and say, this is a really good idea, or no, we don't agree with this. And then we see how much we get of what we direct. The second part of the job beyond oversight is the governance. And these are the committee structures that you mentioned, Pat. There are 5 primary policy committees on the Board of Supervisors. Each one of us chairs one committee. In my case, it's the Public Safety and Justice, and is the vice chair for another. And in my case, it's Health and Hospital. We are also all appointed to sit on about 15 to 18 other boards and committees and bodies. Wow. And that is in our governance role. This again is policy setting, it's asking questions. We don't put things into operation. We are more visionary and fund directing, and then the people that are, the staff that is working in all of these areas are the people that really do the very hardest work of making all of this happen and connecting directly with the residents. The third piece is community constituent work. Those 400,000 people that I represent, I try to be in touch with every way I can. I send newsletters. When we're not in COVID, I'm at farmers markets once a month. I'm at neighborhood meetings in different communities. Right now I do regular Zoom meetings, one with my whole community at large every week, another with just small business owners. I need to be responsive to their needs. They elected me to represent them, and I need to hear from them what issues are important, whether there's a lot of support or opposition to any particular topic. And the last thing I'll say is that while so much of this job is prescripted, there is still room to focus on the policy areas that each one of us is particularly passionate about. And for me, it has been children and families, the stability, particularly in those very early years, sets the tone for decades to come. So that's another piece that I just love about this job, is being able to be a generalist with so many topics and have that space as well to say, this is where I really want to dig in the most.
Actually, that was one of the questions I really wanted to ask you later, was about childcare. And then we went through our questions and like, there's just no way, but maybe we'll have a follow-up someday with you. So
Sounds great.
Wonderful. That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I also just want to quickly say that that Otto mentioned at the beginning that we are friends. So many times electeds refer to each other as, this is my good friend, my very good friend, whether they've known each other for 2 minutes or not, whether they hate each other or not. And Otto and I really, really are friends. So for anyone that hears that, we are good friends and thinks, they're just saying that. We are, and I know that you are not a political organization, but I'm clearly political. And we'll talk about endorsements perhaps later, but I have endorsed, which means given my support to Otto in this race, meaning I want him to win so that he can be my colleague and we can work together. So I'm delighted to share this screen with him today.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah, do great things together.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my next question is for Otto Lee. This question is more specific. So it seems like many people have little understanding about the many reasons a person might become homeless. For people who might feel disconnected from this issue, why should they be concerned? Why is it getting worse? And if elected, what's your plan to address this challenging crisis more effectively?
Sure. The homeless situation in America, of course, is complex in many ways. As I mentioned, I've served with the military, and I've also served in Iraq for a year, about 10 years ago. And having seen people coming back from the war, certainly there are many of those are our friends and neighbors. And really sadly to say that a good portion of our homeless population are veterans. And in addition to those who are in the community where due to economic means and reasons that ends up in homeless, and there's certainly folks who also have mental health issues and others, or domestic violence victims. So there's many reasons why people may become homeless. Certainly housing costs is a very serious issue. I mean, I've told people housing costs used to be expensive or high. Now it's no longer high. It's just ridiculous how ridiculously expensive it is to live here, whether it's to buy a home. I mean, every little home now in San Jose is easily $1 million, right? And the fact that with Silicon Valley, we have a problem where we have very good jobs. Despite the pandemic we're going through right now, the largest companies that's located here, your Apple, your Google, your Facebook, they are facing record high on the stock prices. And you could tell that as those companies, or Amazon, these companies are doing very, very well even now. So certainly they are still hiring people. They have a lot of people paying good wages, working with these companies, which also that means that with the geographic situation we have in the Silicon Valley, as you say, valley, we have mountains on both sides, east and the west. And with that, there's really no more land to build. So what we need to do is we do infill. So we need to find more places to build and build faster. It's a supply and demand issue as well. That's why housing prices are so high. And so the issue is certainly quite complex. I mean, it's not just the Silicon Valley. You see it in San Jose. I mean, you see it in San Francisco, on the East Bay as well. And it's something that I think we really need to find many ways to build as many different type of housing as possible. One of which, in terms of transitional and housing, to get people just a shelter, right? I think it is so important. And I mentioned my military experience. When I was in Iraq, I actually lived in a container box, not the whole container box, it was 40-foot container box, a third of a box. And that's how the military used to house people, where they convert basically these container units into housing units to give people a shelter and the soldiers. And it's not luxury by any stretch of imagination, but it's got windows, got a door, and it's a hard surface. So it's actually something that you have some privacy and safety away from the elements. So I'm not saying that's the only way to solve this problem, but I think all these are issues and solutions that we should consider coming together so that we could actually get people off the street, from the highways and whatnot, to a place where there's a shelter or somewhere that people have a place to live. Because, as rich as we are in Santa Clara County, right, it's really a shame that we still have that serious of a homeless problem that we see in so many places. And we could talk more on that, obviously, but yeah.
Yeah, I can see that we way underestimated how much we would want to get, and it's great, by the way, and we won't be able to get to all the people in the comment section, but I do see that Ning was commenting and wanted to know how you can get the support from richer neighborhoods who feel like they're not directly affected by homelessness. Do you have any quick thoughts on that for Ning?
Yeah, so I would say that certainly there's the bubble we all live in, right? I mean, that's just like COVID. We say, we're in this storm together, but we're not in the boats together. Different boats, we're in very different boats. And I think we also seeing from the COVID statistics, right? The 4 zip codes on the east side, San Jose, for example, has the highest number of it. And it's affecting the ethnic, some of the Black and brown community especially harsh, and some Asian community as well. So I think it is crucially important that our resources needs to be directed to where the need is most. And I think that's where the county has such a huge role to play, because as Susan said, it really is the agency that deliver services. And we say public safety net is that whether we talk medical, like the Valley Medical Center that we have, those services that we provide, we really want to make sure that whether you have insurance or not, whether you're documented or not, we want to make sure that people do get those services. And that's why we call ourselves also the Sanctuary County, because we don't want to play that game with what the federal government or the president is trying to label us in certain names. I mean, a lot of the audience being Chinese Americans understand. I mean, this Chinese flu or worse yet, Kung flu and all that. It's really, really, I mean, I hate to say it's racist, and I really don't see that to be helpful. And I think it's so hard that we need to all work together to help each other, especially in this time of crisis. Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you for that. And we will do our best and we want to try to respect both of your time as well, and do our best to end on time here. And as I say that, we're getting into like a really big topic now. It's on everyone's mind for Susan, since you're really already in the thick of it there on the board of supervisors. The world as we know it has changed after the pandemic hit. And even though many people have been working very hard on this crisis, the virus is still not under control. What are you most concerned about with this pandemic? And do you have any updates for us in terms of combating the virus and protecting our communities, especially the most vulnerable groups?
Yeah,
I know, I'm sorry.
This is my #1 priority right now. I made that clear in a public newsletter. I made that clear during our county budget hearings. I think that what we must be doing before anything else is fully addressing and stopping the transmission of this virus. Because until we do that, our economy can't recover. Our kids cannot be back in school. We really can't proceed with anything. So when I hear the conversation of, you have to choose between the health crisis and the economic crisis, you really don't. Because if the health isn't first, if we haven't tamped that down, there will be no other recovery. Now, having said that, my priority has also been to be as open as we safely can be, because I know that the economic impacts have been devastating. And I've been talking with business owners for months, many of whom still remain closed. For whom this isn't an exercise. This is their livelihood. This is their families. So we need to be able to contain the virus. And what we haven't done really across this country is a complete shutdown for a number of weeks. That should have happened back in March. Our county was the very first to declare a shelter in place, led by our public health officer, Dr. Sarah Cody. 5 other Bay Area public health officers joined with her. We did a pretty complete shutdown for a number of weeks. But then we started to open up quickly, again, responding to a lot of that economic pressure. And what we have now is a situation where our case count is still going up. Just this past week, we saw an increase in the county of 2,026 cases. 162 people are currently hospitalized. We've had an increase in deaths by 10 people just in the last week. And it's so basic, but if every single person follows the safety protocols, we really can do much better than we're doing. The reason that the county adopted an emergency ordinance a week and a half ago, which means that we are now enforcing the public health order in a much more aggressive way, is because we are seeing people still outside without a mask, people still gathering, well, it's just my family, it's just my close friends, as if the virus can tell if it's your work colleague or your sister. We're still transmitting the virus. So what I would tell all of you is, if you don't need to be out somewhere because it's connected to your job, please still be in your house. If you are outside, absolutely wear a mask. Maintain social distancing from other individuals by 6 feet. Those are the pieces that we can do. The parts that the county is really focused on, and where I want to see the funding going, is on making sure we have sufficient testing and testing with a faster turnaround. Because if we want to stop the transmission, we need to know if somebody is positive that day. Knowing 5 days later is significantly less helpful. And what we need to do is, once we've identified a case, is that we have to track all of the people with whom that person who is diagnosed positive has had close contact with in the last, I think it's 4 days. So what will happen for any of you to know is that you may get a call from the county public health department, either because you have tested positive, or because, unbeknownst to you, someone you know has tested positive and they have given your name. Please, please answer the phone, answer their questions. They're going to ask you about symptoms, about where you have been and who else you have been in contact with. They will not ask you about immigration status. They will not ask you for your social security number. They will not ask you for any financial information, because of course, every time there's a new plan, there's a new scam. So take the chance first that it's real, answer the call, and please, please be willing to share that information so that we can let the people around each of us know if there's a reason to quarantine for 14 days. And then the last piece that needs to be funded are what's called isolation supports. So for someone who either has been given a positive diagnosis or has had those close contacts and needs to stay home, that's a problem for a lot of people. One, if they're in a crowded household with different generations, they may not be able to protect the other people if they stay in the house. There are occasions where we need to provide hotel spaces for folks to wait out those 14 days. There are people who work in essential jobs or are afraid will be fired if they can't continue to work. We need to provide some financial support. If it's a single adult in a house who has to quarantine, we need to get groceries there. And we are doing all of those things, but we have to know who needs the support. So that is my pitch. We are absolutely not out of this. I would be remiss if I don't quickly take an extra second to thank Michelle and Pat for their heroic efforts early on in helping to get personal protective equipment. The shortages and the politicization around the equipment early on was just mind-blowing. This is a health crisis. This is not a political issue.
And thank you for being so responsive, because we reached out to you. We felt like you could really understand the concern from the Chinese community and being targeted and having so that donation really came from all of us at our the Society of Heart's Delight, and it was,
thank you all.
It was such a memorable experience, and when you're just facing everything, it feels like, what can I do? Just do something, it just makes you feel better. Right. And so just a really quick follow-up. When the vaccine is available, will the county be involved in distribution, and if so, how?
Yes, and very likely through all of our health clinics and through our mass distribution sites. We have just set up at the county fairgrounds a massive testing center that will also be used in the fall for flu shots. There is going to be a press like you have never seen before for everyone in this community to get a flu shot, because we do have a vaccine for the seasonal flu. And if we can at least tamp that down, we'll still certainly have to deal with COVID, but please, please get a flu shot from your doctor or from a clinic or to the fairgrounds. And after this call, I will send Pat and Michelle a list of links basically to everything that I mentioned today, getting more information about COVID, about budget, about flu shots, and then if you could share those with everyone today, that would be terrific.
I was actually about to anything that we can do to.
Oh, good. I can't do it fast enough to put it in the chat and listen to you, but I'll do it after.
Just, like I said, we're learning how to do these.
There you go.
Conversations. It's just I know we're running kind of close here on time. So let's see.
My next question is for Otto. If elected, you will become supervisor at a time when the county is facing serious challenges on multiple fronts, and the budget won't be enough to cover all the needs at the same time. Given this, what are your top 3 priorities and why?
Sure, thank you. The pandemic has certainly caused a very significant economic drain, and I think Susan's been staying the last few days to deal with the budget priorities, and those are really tough decisions that has to be made. For me, I would say clearly one of the main mission of the county really is public health, and right now, in order for our county to get back to quote unquote normal, making sure the funding is there to make sure COVID is going to be under control is so important. And I think, Susan's alluded to all the great things that's on the plan that will need to happen for sure. We talk about the housing and homeless issues, and then because of the fact that when we talk about homeless, it's not just a matter of housing, it's about mental health, it's about the drug alcoholic rehab, we talk about mental health. Those are things that are so important in veteran services. Those are things that the county actually has the jurisdiction to deal with. So I want to make sure that we are going to be much more focused. As we've learned from this most recent protests of some people talking about, defunding police and all that. I'm not interested in defund police as much as I want to make sure that the funding really needs to go to where the services is most needed. Having police officers to chase around homeless people doesn't make sense. To deal with people who've got mental health issues, that doesn't make sense. So we really need to make sure that the funding going to those areas is going to be applied properly. And another area which I think is very much, to me, is like a disaster preparation, is something that I think the government certainly has a huge role to play. So whether you're talking about earthquake or fire, and of course fire right now is such a big issue that we're seeing. We have basically the third largest fire in California's history and still growing, and we don't have a real good control of it yet. It really shows that climate change, has really changed how we live. Whether about the hurricanes or how about the fire seasons is earlier than ever, and this is something that we really need to get a handle of, because it is not a city by city problem. Certainly fire knows no boundaries. It's a regional thing, and of course it's statewide as well. So I really want to make sure that these are the issues that the county can take on to try to be more prepared in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, and I was trying to think, like, what can we do? I've seen some people on Facebook saying, like, hey, if anyone needs me to foster your cat while you're out of your house. If you guys think of any other ideas, I hope I'm not speaking too casually saying you guys, it's my habit. But anyway, if Honorable Ellenberg and it's hard to know how to call people. Actually, if someone meets you on the street, what should they be calling each of you? Can you tell our audience that?
Yeah, they should call me Otto.
That's easy.
Formally, and in the context of my work, Supervisor Ellenberg is definitely my preference, but certainly, personally and in conversation, Susan is just fine. Also, I've been putting some information in the chat about our roles, and I just noticed that I was sending it only to panelists, I think, not to all attendees.
Okay, you can change that in the pull down menu there in the chat, but we can copy and paste it as well.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I really should have had someone come with me.
Okay, we will, Michelle can work on that. And now we are finally on part 3, but I know we're running out of time. And this was about, boy, are you guys able to go over a little bit, or are you totally booked up? A little tiny bit. Okay, so let's see. Well, I'm going to skip right to this then, Susan. We hear all the time about getting out the vote and how important it is, but how important is it really? And besides voting, what other advice do you have for someone who might be curious to learn about local politics, but just doesn't know where to begin?
Voting literally matters a tremendous amount, especially with local elections, where we see it. If you look at in the media after elections, races were won or lost by a couple hundred votes. We have numerous races that go into recounts because they are so close. It really matters and really makes a difference. And what some people who are less engaged, especially in California, might think, well, we know that the presidential, help me, Otto, what are they called? The electoral votes are going to go to the Democrat. So why do I have to bother to vote? Either because I'm a Democrat and there are already enough of them, or I'm a Republican and it doesn't matter because it's going to go Dems. Whether or not that is a compelling argument for anyone to not to vote, there is the rest of the ballot, which is critical and where your voice absolutely makes a difference. If you can't vote, so first of all, if you can vote, vote, register, and because of the post office nonsense, vote early. You'll get a ballot in the mail. Vote as quickly as you can. Please don't wait until that last week, which is kind of a change from our more typical circumstances where people really do wait until the last minute, to hear as much as they can from the candidates. if you can't vote, there are still so many reasons to be civically engaged and so many opportunities to do so. Whether or not you can vote yourself, you can influence your circle of friends and colleagues and peers. If there's a candidate that you think should really be representing the interests of your community, speak up. Tell your friends, volunteer for that candidate, make phone calls, particularly as immigrants. Very often, campaign volunteers don't have all of the language proficiencies that they need, and groups of voters will not get calls if they don't have a Chinese speaker, a Tagalog speaker, a Vietnamese speaker, a Spanish speaker on their teams. So the fact that you all have at least one additional language makes you incredibly valuable campaign volunteers. So those are other pieces that that you can do, and just learning, asking questions. Go, especially now since everything is on Zoom, watch part of a public meeting on a topic that interests you. Think about, showing up for commission or committee meetings. I would rather be on an arts commission than a planning commission. So that's not one that I would spend a lot of time listening to, but there are so many. And what we can also send you is a list of city and county boards and commissions that people can join. And I have found this to be an incredibly welcoming community. If you want to get involved, nobody's going to say, well, you haven't been here long enough, or you don't have enough money, or you don't have the right whatever. We're so eager for greater engagement that if you want to do something, we can hook you up with whatever your area of interest is. But use your voice, use your power. If you have your vote, use your vote.
That's amazing. And I can vouch for that. I mean, I've been to some events where it was not very well attended, and it was a super well planned, organized event. It was a candidate forum and all these things. So sometimes it's just a matter of going and trying it out. So that's wonderful. Well, I know, Susan, you have to, Otto, you could hang back and answer some questions. I think, Susan, I know that you have to get going. I know you're incredibly busy and you just wrapped up a very intense 5 days, I heard. Do you have anything closing that you'd like to say about your friend Otto? Because I feel like there's so many topics to cover, but it seems like you wanted to make time for that.
Yeah, Otto is the real deal. I mean, what you want, or what I want in a colleague on the board, is somebody who is very smart, thoughtful, analytical, will exercise independent judgment, which is rare and critical, to not necessarily be beheld in every single case to any particular interest group, but to really think about what is best for the residents of Santa Clara County. And because he has served in local government, and because he has a legal background in mind, he is really well positioned to do that. One of the things also that I really admire and will look to Otto's leadership on is that he is a staunch long-term environmentalist. And I think he was called the Green Mayor of Sunnyvale before that was even really a thing. Mm-hmm. He will champion and lead sustainability policies on our board that I think are critical. And again, having each of us have different areas of passion affords each of us also opportunities for leadership and support. I can't take on everything on my own. But I know that the issues that Otto will take on with homelessness, with mental health, with sustainability, with equity in communities, I will be there to be his second and to cheer and support and help him build his own leadership capacity on the board. And, there are only 5 of us. So to me, it's really critical that the relationships are good, that we can build trust, that we can find ways to work together and amplify our impacts in the community. So I am thrilled to be supporting Otto, and I offer that for all of your consideration as well. I'm sure that he or someone on his campaign can put information, if that's allowed, in the chat for him to look up?
Yeah,
okay, no, that's as long as you're not doing it.
Yeah, we're just here to be a space for people to learn. So
excellent. Well, I have a board meeting on Tuesday and a health and hospital committee meeting on Wednesday, so I am off to continue my prep for that.
Just before you go, I want to say thank you for being so supportive of us and of the Chinese community, and also both of you are really strong allies for the LGBTQ community, and it is Silicon Valley Pride Month, so happy Pride.
That's right, happy Pride. Thank you for doing that. And Otto, wish you continued success and a big win in November. And Pat and Michelle, please reach out anytime that this doesn't have to be a one-off. I am always happy to talk with your community, explain issues, answer questions, etc.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Susan.
Yeah.
I know you're slammed. So
bye-bye.
Here, good luck. Okay, Otto, I think we have you to ourselves now, if you have a little bit more time.
Yeah, we have a lot more questions for you.
Oh.
Yeah. As a Chinese American politician, my question is, what's a bamboo ceiling and what can be done to break through? What's your advice for newer Chinese immigrants who have a dream to run for political office one day? I'm not asking for myself. I don't have interest in
Okay, so the term bamboo ceiling came from a different term before called a glass ceiling. What glass ceiling basically meant is that there is a barrier for somebody to get higher. In other words, you cannot get higher than this level. And used to be used to describe, for example, women have this glass ceiling that they are not allowed or be promoted to the CEO position of a company, or to rise up in a higher position through promotion because of the fact that it's the board of directors or something like that is being controlled or occupied mostly by men. That term has become what they call the bamboo ceiling, is in bamboo being Chinese, to basically say that Chinese, or in that sense even Asians, are not being allowed to be promoted to a higher position. So I hope that explains the concept of where the term came from. And a good example of that is in some of the companies, especially the high-tech companies that many of us work in, for hours in Intel, for example, and many high-tech companies where if you look inside the company, a huge percentage of the employees are of the Chinese and Asian descent, right? But at the same time, when you start looking at the very top management, how many VPs or how many senior VP, exec VP, how many CEOs, or even higher up would be the board of directors of the company, right? That really controls the company. How many of them are Chinese or Asian? You suddenly realize that number is far, far less in terms of percentage than the employees of the company, the percent. So that's the term, the bamboo ceiling, is that people say that, well, you're very good engineers, you're very good at what you do, but not so good managers. So therefore you have to have good managerial skills to be a VP, to be a director, to be the CEO, obviously. So I think that's what the term bamboo ceiling came from. It's still very real. And I think the best way for everybody to look at is look at the company that you work at, or the companies of your friends that you're working at, to see who are the CEOs, who, for example, one of the example of who has broken the glass, this bamboo ceiling, is of course the CEO of AMD, Lisa Su, right? Not only a Chinese, but Chinese woman who is the CEO of a company of that size. We don't have to say how successful AMD is, how great the company has been doing. Kicking the butt of Intel is no small feat for any company. And especially led by a Chinese woman in this sense. And so she clearly has broken that ceiling, but that ceiling, I do believe, is still very real in many large or small companies even. So I just want to say, yeah, that I think is where the term comes from, and we still need to work on that issue to make sure people are aware how important it is to not have these stereotype that, Asians are good engineers, but not good managers. And those are not only false, is clearly racist. Mm-hmm.
You also have a very broad base of support for your campaign, it seems like, and like I said, you're a great ally for LGBTQ. So I think it's wonderful to see people reaching across to different communities and to support one another. So normally in a typical campaign, you would be meeting with people in person. What are you doing to reach people during this pandemic? And sort of what do you want people to know about you before they vote? And after that, we're going to open up to a couple questions if you have time.
Sure. So in terms of reaching out, like what we're doing right now, Zoom becomes a de facto way of people meeting now, whether you want or not, whether it's internal company meetings or public meetings. In this case, like a little bit of a public meeting with the audience from different walk of life, different part. The good thing about Zoom is that you don't need to go anywhere physically. So if you have the time, you have the computer and the battery is still charged, you could get on and meet people. So in some ways, you could actually meet more people that way, but obviously that means you'll be attending a lot of different Zoom meetings, zooming in, zooming out. Sometimes you have two laptops going on, two Zoom meetings going on, or a phone or Zoom, or a laptop. So that's one way to do it. We certainly have done things like texting is another way to reach out to people. Social media like Facebook and Instagram has become far more important now than before because more people are spending time in these platforms on discussion and whatnot. So it's so important to make use of these technology to reach out to people. But at the end of the day, even phone banking, we still talk to people on the phone. And that's again, there are just so many ways that we can no longer, like I say, knock on doors. But these are ways that we try to reach out to people since we can have, large scale, fundraisers or meet and greet with people face to face, which is sad because there's that chemistry that we just don't have if you're not face to face. And that's just going to be hard under the time of COVID. And hopefully that would change. But right now, I would say at the earliest, maybe late September, early October, the earliest that could happen. Or at this point, the way we plan is that by November 3rd, when the election takes place, we basically are hoping all outreach will be done through Zoom and not really plan on any real in-person meeting at this point.
Absolutely. All right. So we do have a bunch of questions.
Yeah, we have questions our audience asked. Specific the questions for you, and our team member already translate into English. So yeah, here's the first one.
Or we could just test him in Chinese. Yeah.
Here's the first question. How do you see Chinese Americans' public engagement level? How should Chinese Americans improve their visibility in today's US political system?
It's a great question.
Sure. So compared to say 10, 20 years ago, I think Chinese Americans have certainly been far more active than before. More people have now registered to vote, and you can see more people are being elected or participating in these different boards and commissions. The number, relatively speaking, is still very, very low compared to percentage of us, especially in the Bay Area. So there's a lot of room to do so. And we want certainly to encourage as many people to be engaged, because the more you participate, the more likely that our voices can be heard. For example, this year for the county supervisor, if elected, I will be the very first time a Chinese American has been elected to the county's history. Well, trust me, the Chinese Americans have been in this county for over a century.
Yeah.
You look at the days of the Zhou Jingsan, right? When people were here for digging gold back in the mid 1800s, that's 160 years ago. Isn't that amazing? That we still don't have a Chinese representation directly on the Board of Supervisors, for example. And even in the city level at Sunnyvale, I was the first, me along Dean Xue, the only first ever elected Asian and Chinese on that board. And since then, we finally have one right now. So the numbers are still very low, to be honest with you. So there's a lot more room to grow. Mm-hmm.
I think it's so cool that you started off by volunteering for a commission. I mean, I noticed some people in the audience also found that really fascinating. So that's great.
Yeah, here's another question, really good question. If the public view in your own district is different from your own political views on a particular issue, what would you do?
Right. It's a great question, because at the end of the day, we are elected to represent our constituencies. So the ability to understand our constituents' point of view is so important. Now, I would say that the goal and the job of an elected official is not necessarily representing a small part of a constituency. Sometimes you're very vocal a minority group. I mean, that's certainly something you need to listen to. But at the end of the day, the decision making is about trying to help out the greater good for the entire county and for the whole district. So I think these are the areas that you need to balance. When those interests lies alongside, that's easy, right, to support. The hard part is when those diverge, because, for example, the constituency does not really understand the thinking that I have. And I'll try to do as much as I can in terms of outreach so that I can learn and understand more of their particular opinion, and also try to share my views of why I believe these are the ways. And I really hope through open dialogue on both sides, we could better educate each other. But at the end of the day, I think what people really care about is that the elected official is somebody that they can access to and that they get listened to. I think to me, that is really the most important part. And I think what Susan said, which I treasure what she said, is that I do not get stuck with a certain group like the labor or the chamber or any type of special interest group, because I would respect their views, but I'm never a puppet of any specific group, which unfortunately in state government or federal government, sometimes we see that people vote by these type of special interests. Because the party does it this way, then they will automatically do that way. To me, that is not really a good democratic government. It's not good because your constituency's view doesn't matter, right? You just go because the party goes that way. And I think that's very unfortunate. And there will be times that I would be against what my party believes because I don't believe that's the right thing. And because I truly believe at the end of the day, it's the constituency that I represent, and it's for the greater good that matters at the end of the day. Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is in the words of one of our viewers. So I haven't validated any of this at all. We haven't fact checked any of this, but it says your competitor opposes Prop 16, and in doing that, he gained wide support in the Chinese community. I don't know if that part is true. How do you communicate with voters on such a divided issue?
Right. So that's a great question, and I'll be happy to forward in the link of a article that I have written as an editorial in English that was published in the American News regarding my view of why my personal experience on. So Prop 16 is they also call ACE5 is the proposition, is the proposal coming up in the November election to get rid of Prop 209, which is 24 years ago, the California voters have voted to get rid of we call affirmative action, which is a measure to try to accomplish some type of equity in higher education or hiring or public employment. And for both ethnic and also gender equity. So it's not for women as well, right? Not just, and also for different races. So with Prop 16, the argument has a lot of times between the fact that one says, well, you should not ever consider race as a reason when it comes to admitting students into the public university like UC Berkeley or Cal State, right? The schools. And that passed back in the 1990s. And I myself actually was a student of UC Berkeley, and I went to UC Hastings as well. A lot of people didn't realize this. I actually was a beneficiary, a product of this affirmative action program, especially for UC Hastings, because English is my second language. My English wasn't as good at the time, especially when I first came as an immigrant. And it took me a while to really learn, not just speaking the language, but writing English is not easy. For many of the Chinese Americans on this call, especially those who immigrated from here, understand how hard it is. Because English is not one of those languages that you can't even pronounce how it's spelled. Right, and there's so many exceptions to every rule that you've learned, and certainly was something that took me a long time to able to understand and write well enough, and especially, and the program that was afforded under the affirmative action that I went through is not just a matter of getting into the school. It also provides the tutoring program for the entire first year of law school, for example, which to me was absolutely crucial for my own personal success in terms of getting through. And I have classmates who went through the program. Not everybody made it through. I mean, some of them that did have to drop out. But I think by all metrics, that program actually do help individuals who have certain handicaps for whatever reason, social, economic background. And that's what affirmative action is supposed to do, is to identify folks who don't have the same opportunity as others, but giving them the chance to excel. And I haven't gone through the program. I really truly understand the importance of it. Clearly, there's a study actually just came out this Friday by one of the a UC Berkeley researcher to show that for the past 24 years after the passage of the this Prop 209, the number of Blacks and Latinos that have not been able to get into schools, those numbers are pretty significant. And with that change, that drop in enrollment, the future of the earnings and has been affected is quite dramatic. While the impact against those that would have been taken out, maybe white students and some might be even Asian students, incomparable wise, the cost and benefit on the two sides are pretty dramatic, and the need of having that equity, because there's equality and there's equity, right? And a good way of explaining the difference is that it's like you have three people. You have a tall person, you have a regular height person, and a shorter person. Equality is giving each of them a same box to stand on to look over a fence, right? So even though you're able to give them the same box, but that's not going to be able to help everyone because they started in the different height. And you can think of that for education, is with people do have, you know, as we all know, the different school district that you go to just in Santa Clara County is very different. If you live in a more expensive neighborhood, the school district tends to be better funded. Every student gets more funding, and because of the funding, the teachers and the number of students in the class might be less per teacher, and the academic performance tends to be better. If you go to the east side, like in San Jose, where it's more Latinos and Black neighborhoods, the academic achievement of those schools tends to be lesser. And so right off the bat, you know, the success of us is really determined right off the bat where we live. And that's the inequality that we already started with. So based on that, by, you know, giving them just a test and based on GPA and say, okay, based on that, you should just accept those just blindly, not looking at the fact where they came from, I think is unfortunate, and it's not truly fair or equitable at the very end of the day. And, you know, last thing is with the George Floyd, Black Lives Matter movement, we are seeing that, you know, it's really sad to see not just the Bay Area, the entire United States, that as much as we had the president of the United States being Black one time called Barack Obama, the racial problem is nowhere near being solved. Racism is very real. The pain that many of our minority communities are facing, the schools and all these other problems, is still very real. And I think this is where affirmative action may be able to help a little bit. It's not going to solve every problem, but I think it's going to give it a little bit of a help. And that's why I think it is important that we consider having that program being brought back to help some of the students, to give them that ability to, like that I did, that I received, to succeed in those environments. It's a very complicated subject, obviously very controversial. People, you know, some people are not going to listen to what I just said. They say, look, I only care about my kids. I only care about, you know, if my kids can go to Berkeley, doggone it, I'm going to go against you. If that's your view, I can't convince you, right? But I think it's the question when I talk about the greater good is it only about me and my family, or is it about the greater of the community, the us? And I think it's so important sometimes for us to think as a democratic society, as a community, I'm okay, you're not okay. In my view, that's not okay. I really want to hope that everybody can be okay at the end of the day. That's what I think the public official is supposed to do is to try to, like you say, have a very diverse support for my community, for my campaign. And because at the end of the day, when I serve, I don't only serve one community, I serve everybody.
Okay, well, thank you for talking about, like you said, it's a complicated issue. There's a lot of emotions for people who feel very strong. And so I think it's important that they hear from you directly on that topic. Well, are there any other questions real quick at the end? I think we've already kind of a little bit gone over.
Yeah, a lot.
So do you have any closing thoughts, anything you'd like to say just to wrap up this time with our community?
Right. So as Susan has said regarding the voting, right? How important is voting? I want to even step back of how important that view is. So for many of the audience, if you've lived in China, you know, we understand the type of freedom that we have in this country. Some people say it's the United States too free. Well, I said, you know, let's use freedom of speech as an example. In case people ever wonder, I would say this, use this as a simple test. If you could stand in the middle of a public area and scream loudly the name of the leader and criticize them and say bad things about them and not get arrested, you are living in a place where you have freedom of speech. I think that's a very simple test. Whether you're in Belarus, you're in Russia, you're in China, you're here, Taiwan, or here, I mean, just find.
Have you done that test with Donald Trump, Otto Lee?
Oh yeah, well, you know, I have not only done that test every day. If you ever visit the White House, right outside the White House, whether it's Barack Obama, Donald Trump, any president, there's always somebody protesting against the president of the United States right outside the White House every day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you'll see that anywhere near in the middle of Tiananmen Square, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but honestly, I think that's also changing in Hong Kong, where you probably could have done that, you know, before July 1st, and that might be the changes that is coming, which is, I think, is quite sad for Hong Kong. I'm never a fan of violence, you know, throwing fire bombs and, you know, all those things. I certainly, I'm very, very sad to see those type of use of violence and in that type of a regard. But at the same time, I would say that, you know, we do have a democratic society that every vote does count. It does count. And you know, whether it's congressional race, local races, county, city races, the smaller the jurisdiction, the more important your vote is, because the less number of people is required to vote for somebody to get elected. And therefore, you know, everybody wants to say, oh, this is Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. Well, besides that on a ticket, there are multiple things on the ballot that would matter. And for example, whether you're yes on Prop 16 or no on Prop 16, as much as you might not agree with me, I still encourage you to exercise your right to vote, because doggone it, this country, you know, when you swear to the Constitution to become a United States citizen, one of your rights and responsibility is ability to vote. And your voice is important when we want to hear about it. And at the end of the day, we might pass, we might not pass. You know, that's how the democratic society works. When we do not show up to vote, this is when other people will decide for you. It's almost like this. I use the example as in two things. Number one is, it's about food, right? We Chinese, we love to eat. So we talk about two things. One is, if you are not at the table, you're on the menu, right? That's the second thing is, if you don't vote, what just happened is that instead of you ordering what you want to eat, you just let somebody else order to tell you what to eat.
Yep.
Exactly.
And we definitely feel that way. So that's why we said, although, you know, we're not a political organization, really this is about everyone can exercise their right and responsibility to vote however they choose. But, you know, we hope that people can be informed and meet more people and actually get interested in it, because I think it's a great way to feel a sense of belonging and, you know, just be a part of larger society.
Right.
So.
And the thing is, we don't need to be nasty, right? The fact that we don't agree with somebody doesn't make somebody as an enemy. We're not enemies. We are all Americans here. We are all living in this community, try to make our place better. And I think it's so important that our language, our vitriol, doesn't lower ourselves to that state. I don't think that's healthy. I think we need to show proper respect. That's still very important. And, you know, and I'm not going to be able to agree to everything you say or all the audience says. But at the same time, I certainly respect your view. I always tell people, listen, at the end of the day, you think I agree 100% with my wife? You think we argue? A lot, yes. We still love each other, right? And so that's how we live. We are family, we're a community, and despite the fact that we have our own disagreement, we still have to be respectful and hope to make our community better. Because at the end of the day, what do we want? Right? We want a clean environment. We want better schools for our kids. We want a better future for our children. That they have better opportunities than we did when we first grew up. So these are all the same things we want. So
this is wonderful. I mean,
yeah, wonderful. Yes.
I'm so glad that you could stay longer to talk to us. And
you can see our audience.
Yeah, we're getting lots of enthusiastic feedback.
For
so
you.
They love the metaphor. If you're not at the table, you're maybe on the menu. So so thank you so much, Otto, for taking the time to talk to all of us. And we'll also be sharing this on our YouTube channel for the Society of Heart's Delight. And our next event is going to move to the state level. And we're honored to have California state controller Betty Yee will be joining us, along with a California State Senate candidate, Ann Ravel, who is a former Barack Obama appointee to the FEC, the Federal Exchange Commission. And also has a very interesting background, how she got into politics, comes from an immigrant background as well, and a couple of just really inspiring women. So we hope all of our viewers will join us again. And after we, sort of process the video, we'll also put this on our YouTube channel. So great. So thank you for staying a little bit longer. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, take care. See you all next time. Stay safe. Bye-bye.